and down.
Welcome to MCN and the BMW R1300GS. Now, BMW have thrown the kitchen sink at making the GS better than ever. It's lighter, it's more agile, it's smaller, it's more powerful, it's got more grunt, it's got a higher level of standard equipment, it's got more options than ever, and BMW have needed to do all of this to stay ahead of the competition. So if you think the GS is one of the world's most popular big bikes, it's the jewel in BMW's crown, but they haven't had it their own way over recent years. They've had stiff competition from the likes of KTM with its 1290 Super Adventure S, the Ducati Multistrada V4, the Triumph Tiger 1200 GT, and the much loved Honda Africa Twin. Now, they've started from a clean sheet of paper. So it's got a new engine, it's got a new chassis, it's got new suspension, new electronics. So if we start with the engine, it's still a boxer twin. It still makes the same noise. It's still got that real nice rorty character. And it still goes like stink. I mean, that's one of the things with the old GS. It's a lot faster than people give it credit for. It's still got that kind of pipe and slippers reputation, but it's a quick bike. And the new one is more powerful. It's got 143 bhp compared to the old 1250's 134. Quoted 0 to 60 time is 3.4 seconds, so it doesn't hang around. And BMW have made these improvements by completely revamping the engine. So it's a 1300cc now, bang on the money, and it has got a shorter stroke and a bigger bore, so it's an over square engine, which you would think would make it kind of quite racy, because that's what happens in superbike racing and MotoGP. To make engines more powerful, you make them rev harder. But that's not the case here with the GS. Yes, it's got a 9,000 RPM red line, but its maximum power is still made at the same RPM. It's got another 4 pound-foot of torque, which is only made 250 RPM above where it was. But most crucially, it's got more power all the way through the revs. It's also got shift cam like it had before with variable valve timing, so that kind of fills in the power at bottom revs and allows the engine still to make good power above. What I would say is that the engine character doesn't feel too different to before. It's got a little bit more pep, but basically it's the same GS we know and love. BMW haven't gone after big power figures. It never needed massive power before, and it still doesn't need it now, because the range that you ride a GS in generally is just for mainly touring, just fun riding on the road, and it's got all the grunt in the world for that. It's also got a lot smaller engine, which has allowed a longer swinging arm, so the engine actually helps the basic architecture of the bike. And they've done that by moving the gearbox from behind the engine to underneath, so the whole engine is more compact. And the engine and the powertrain contribute massively, almost entirely, towards the bike's 12 kilo weight reduction over the old bike, which is quite a figure. It's also got a 2.5 kilo lighter lithium battery as well, so the bike is a lot lighter before. The throttle manners are very friendly. It's got a nice throttle response. The power delivery is friendly. Everything is kind of tick, 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 tick. It's win, 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 win. The only thing I'm not too keen on the road is that at high revs, when you're going for it, it's got quite a lot of engine braking, which you can't adjust. But if you use the engine in its kind of sweet spot, which is sort of between 3,000 and 7,000 revs really, then you don't have that engine braking problem at all, and it's really nice and really smooth. When you jump on the GS, it feels a lot more nimble. The tank is smaller and lower. The tank's actually down in capacity from 20 litres to 19. But BMW say it does 59 mpg, and that's a tank range of nearly 250 miles. We'll put that to the test when we get to ride these bikes back in the UK on the MCN 250. So tank range hasn't been affected too much, but you really feel how much smaller the bike feels. So despite having a bigger engine, the whole bike feels smaller. You know, it could be a GS 850 almost. It feels that nimble. But despite that, the GS still has a familiar feel. When you jump on, you've still got those wide bars, familiar wide bars. You've still got that beautiful 6.5 inch colour dash, which is more or less the same before. One of the only things that looks quite similar actually, but BMW never really needed to change it because it's a fantastic display, one of the best around, still is. But it contains some different functions. It's got a sports screen now, and also there's some new switchgear, and there's a button on the switchgear that lets you go quickly to some of the menu functions, so you don't have to go all the way through the menus, layer and layer of menu. Things like adjusting the screen, the electric screen, which is a first for the GS, adjusting the heated grips, heated seat if you've opted for it, the suspension, the radar cruise if you've opted for it. So the dash is familiar, but it gives you a lot more. The switchgear is familiar, but it gives you a lot more. The screen shape looks more or less the same. So the sort of riding position, the layout, the comfort triangle, if you like, is very similar. So you know you're on a GS, and it still feels substantial, but it still feels nimble at the same time. Talking of screens, it's got a different shape screen. Standard screen is manually adjustable with a lever instead of a dial, which is a lot easier, but you can opt for an electric screen for the first time. And I've got to say that adventure bikes are loud when it comes to wind noise, but this isn't too bad. It's pretty quiet, so I think that make a big difference when you're doing long distance. It's very agile, it's very nimble, and the handling is largely the same. So gone is the old tubular steel frame. That's been put in the bin, and in its place you've got this pressed steel shell frame, which has allowed BMW to make it more compact, and the engine is a stressed member. It looks strange with no engine in it, but when it's all together it looks absolutely beautiful and all in proportion. It's got a cast aluminium subframe. The handling, this is the weird thing about the new GS. So it is completely new, down to every nut and bolt. But to ride it kind of feels the same. It's more accurate now. The steering is lighter and it's more direct, but it still has the old GS traits. So it's not the fastest steering bike in the world, and sometimes on and off the throttle, the suspension can get a little bit bouncy. So it's not as crisp and direct as it could be with a bike with conventional suspension. So, you know, a Triumph Tiger probably handle more crisply, so will a Multistrada. A KTM handles more like a Supermoto. So, you know, BMW haven't moved the game that far forward with the handling, but what it is, and what everyone loved about it before, is very predictable, very stable, and when you actually are pushing on, it's got a lot of grip. It really finds a lot of grip. It just digs itself into the ground. It's running on new Metzeler Tourance Next 2 dual purpose tyres, which are absolutely fantastic. One of the best of the breed when it comes to dual purpose tyres. It's also got new brake calipers, bigger discs. So the braking is nice and powerful, nice and progressive. The rear brake's really nice. And that new gearbox is really crisp, especially when you use it with a quick shifter. There are lots of new innovations on the GS which make it a lot nicer to live with, both in standard trim and if you tick the options boxes. So standard, you get a nice little cubby hole on the top of the tank to put your phone into. There's lots of nice paint finishes. You've got kind of a sandcast finish on the cylinder heads. You've got a textured finish on the tank. You've got a little toggle on the centre stand if you opt for that, which makes it easier to get it on and off. But also, it's got a few really big innovations. The first of all is in the suspension department. So in standard trim, it's got non-adjustable front telelever, and the telelever's been revised. It's lighter, it's stronger, it's more flexible where it needs to be. The same goes with the power lever shaft drive rear. So the front's non-adjustable, the rear is adjustable for preload and rebound damping. But if you go for the semi-active option, then you've got a whole world of new features to play with. So as before, it's got semi-active damping, so that changes as you ride along, and it changes within the riding modes, and that kind of stiffens up or softens off depending on what you need, more comfort or more control. And also you've got a self-leveling rear shock that compensates for extra load, so the bike will always keep its shape whether you've got pillion or luggage or you're riding by yourself. So that's all there, but you've also now got variable rate springs. So before, where the damping changes would give the impression the bike's stiffer or softer, in actual fact it's just slowing and speeding up the suspension. The actual springs themselves go harder or softer. So in standard trim, you're using the main springs on the front and rear shock, which are relatively soft, so they work in the lower riding modes. And then if you select a sportier riding mode, there are extra springs in the piggyback shocks. They come into play, and then they add to the soft springs to make the whole setup more stiffly sprung. It works really well, and it's really progressive. You don't feel any big jump in the way the bike behaves depending on how fast you're riding it. But what I would say is that the difference between hard and soft spring isn't night and day. The harder springs don't turn the GS into a S1000RR, but it just gives you that little bit more support and kind of gives the bike a wider appeal, and you can use it in more instances. But that's a real clever trick, and that's an options box you've got to tick if you're going to get a GS. The other thing it's got is a radar cruise control for the first time, so that kind of sticks behind a vehicle at a certain speed, and it'll always follow it. Its radar also controls blind spot indicators and a collision avoidance device. So like quite a few motorcycles with radar, if you approach or something's approaching you at speed when you've got the cruise control off, then it thinks you might be having a collision, and the dash will light up to tell you. The BMW here does the same thing, but it will also dab on the brakes as well, just to give you a little wake-up call. If you're still not awake, it will actually apply the brakes for you. Now, we didn't test this here at the launch when we're all riding like little ducks following each other, but that's something we'll need to put to the test when we get the bike back to the UK. And finally, when it comes to innovations, the BMW has got a ride height device. It's not the first bike to have it. The Harley Davidson Pan America was the first one to have it, and now the Multistrada V4 Rally. But now this has got a ride height device, and it drops 30 millimeters, taking the seat height from 850 to 820 millimeters as it comes to a stop. And then as it pulls away again, it rises up. Now, I didn't notice too much difference because I'm 6 foot tall and I can get my feet flat on the ground anyway. But for the shorter riders on our test, definitely thought it was a really good idea. We also took the GS off-road with the trophy version, which is a little bit more expensive, £830 more expensive on top of the $15,990 base price. That's where are we now? October 2023. So those prices are right at the moment. That's got an 870mm seat height as well as spoked wheels, radiator guard, that kind of thing. And also fitted with Metzeler Karoo 4 tyres for our little expedition off-road. And we didn't do anything really hardcore, and I'm not the best off-road rider in the world. So I wouldn't be able to dig deep and tell you exactly what it's like at the limit. All I can tell you is that it's a lot easier to manage because the bike's so small and so light and so nimble. It does feel like a smaller bike. So, you know, if you're going to do some light off-roading and you're not Sam Sunderland, then the GS is going to be a lot friendlier. But what I would say for the less experienced, if you're going to do a little bit of off-road, a middleweight adventure bike or even a smaller off-roader would still be the way to go. But the changes to the new big GS definitely help it when your tyres get muddy. So you get a lot of toys for your money. Standard equipment includes 4 riding modes, traction control, ABS, a manually adjustable screen, new handguards with integrated indicators, LEDs, heated grips, keyless ignition, hill hold control, 2 power sockets and a lithium-ion battery. After that, the sky is the absolute limit when it comes to accessories. Everything for comfort, seats, levers, suspension. You can also get taller, 20mm taller sport suspension. The list is absolutely endless. You can customize this GS to within an inch of its life and get it absolutely perfect for the way you ride, whether it's sporty riding, touring riding, or off-road. On top of that GS Trophy, there's also a couple of other options, and you can go for the much loved triple black with the two-tone black paint job and a few extra goodies. And there's also an option 719 Tramontana, which costs an extra £2,260, which has got milled aluminium parts, comfort seats, foot pegs, a centre stand, electric screen and spoke wheels. BMW's new R1300GS has got all these new parts, but it's still a GS, albeit a smoother, lighter, more powerful, easier to ride, safer, more fun version of its former self. Despite the changes, the high level of spec, huge array of accessories, and even a sophisticated new robotic production line at BMW's Berlin plant, it's more of a subtle evolution than a revolution. Rather than it offering a completely new riding experience, the new GS is simply a machine for more riders to enjoy in more situations. The R1300GS is unlikely to beat its rivals in the areas that they're really, really good at. So it's not going to be the best off-roader, it's not going to be the fastest and most powerful. They're not going after big power figures. It's not going to be the best handling, but the new 1300 has moved the 1250 on to be better at all of those things, and all of those things roll together make it a fantastic all-rounder. And this new R1300GS is going to be hard to beat. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe. We'll see you at the next one.